Even from an early age, I loved to read, so my parents were not surprised that I advanced quickly when it came to the books I was reading. When I was 7 was the first time I was introduced to Alice in Wonderland. The idea of living in a magical world where you could talk to animals, grow and shrink, and foil an evil queen was something I relished for as a child. But my favorite part of the book was the Mad Hatter and his tea party. He seemed to always be having fun with the hair. This is why when my birthday was fast approaching and my parents asked me what I wanted for my birthday, I told them I wanted a tea set of my own. When my big day finally arrived and it was time for me to open my presents, my grandmother gave me a small package. I opened it up, and inside, I saw she had gotten me a very nice copy of Alice in Wonderland. I was so excited to go over to her and hug her. Thank you, I told her, my voice muffled by her clothes. Next, my dad brought out a box from the closet. He gently sat it down in front of me. Hoping it was my tea set, I took extra care to unwrap it so that it wouldn't break. As I gently pulled the paper back, I saw what I had only dreamed it was: my tea set. It was ivory white with delicate pink rose petals adorning the sides. It was placed gently in a beautiful wooden box that had been stuffed with tissue paper. I reached in and gently lifted the teapot out of the box. I looked at its beauty as I turned it around in my hands, trying to memorize every detail. I was so happy, I began to cry when I hugged my mom and dad. My mom told me that the tea set was very fragile and easily broken, so I had to be very careful with it. She agreed to let me put it in my room with a promise to be careful with it. I readily agreed, and that night, me and her carefully washed every single piece. I went to sleep that night, excited that tomorrow I would be able to emulate my favorite characters from Wonderland. The next day I had to go to school. I thought about setting up my play table in my bedroom and me and my mom having a tea party. When I got home, I asked her if she would like to join me, but she told me that she had too much cleaning that she had to get done and couldn't right then. I knew that my brother wouldn't want to play with me, so I grabbed all of my stuffed animals and set them up around the table. I didn't really like tea, so my mom gave me some apple juice to drink out of my teacups. I was sitting carrying on a conversation with my guests when I saw a shadow walk into the kitchen out of the corner of my eye. I knew my brother and mom were in there, so I figured my dad must have been home from work. I walked in and looked around, not seeing him anywhere. Confused, I asked my mom, "Where's Dad at?" "He isn't home from work yet," she told me, as if that should have been obvious given the time. I walked back into my bedroom to continue playing there. I found all of my stuffed animals had fallen off their chairs. I ran back into the kitchen and pointed at my brother, figuring he had been the one to knock them on the ground. "Mom, Jesse knocked all my stuffed animals off the chairs," I told her. My brother started to protest, but my mom cut him off with a motion of her hand. "Your brother didn't touch your stuffed animals, hon. He's been in here with me the entire time." Now I was really confused. "But my animals," I trailed off. I walked back into my room and picked them all up and put them back in their respective places. I strongly scolded all of them for trying to leave in the middle of the tea party. I poured myself some more juice and continued playing. I stayed at the table making fake small talk until it was time for dinner. My mom called me into the dining room for me to eat, and I told all of my guests not to try and leave. This time I would be right back. In the middle of dinner, Mom got up to go rotate some laundry she had going. We heard it crash in the laundry room, and my dad got up to go look at what had happened. I could hear them talking in loud whispers, but couldn't make out the words. They came back into the kitchen, and I noticed something had obviously disturbed my mom very much. She looked scared for some reason. I tried to ask her what was wrong, but she just brushed the question off, telling me that she was fine and not to worry. I hurried and finished eating, wanting to get back to my bedroom to finish playing. When I walked in, the room was very cold. Figuring the air conditioner was on, I went out and asked my dad if he could turn the temperature up on the thermostat because my room was too cold. He told me that the AC was off. I insisted that he come back and feel how cold my room was. Maybe he had forgotten that he had turned it on. When he walked into my room, he admitted that it was cold, but he couldn't find any reason for it. There was no airflow coming from the vents. He shrugged and walked out the door. I sat down at my table and started carefully picking up every cup and saucer that I had put out so I could take them into the kitchen for my mom to wash. I had a sudden feeling that I was being watched from the door, but when I turned around, no one was there. I walked over to the entry and looked up and down the hall to see if someone had just walked away, but again, I couldn't see anything. I turned around and froze. There, standing next to the table, was a little girl. She looked to have on a dress that wasn't familiar. I now know it was a Victorian-era dress. It was dark blue, with frills going all the way up her neck. She looked at me and pointed, then started walking towards me. I screamed as loud as I could and nearly dropped all the cups in my hand. I ran to the corner and huddled there, hoping someone had heard me. The door banged open beside me, and my mom took me in her arms, drying my tears with her thumb. "What's the matter, baby?" she asked me with a hint of fear in her voice. "There was a girl over there. She was in my room," I told her. "What did she look like, Hope? Tell me what she looked like," she said quickly. When I began talking, my mom's eyes seemed to get wider with every detail that I could remember. After I had told her what had happened, she told me it was time to clean up the cups and put away the tea set. I asked her why I had to stop playing, but she would only give me a brief "because I told you so" answer. Why would my parents give me a tea set, then not let me use it? I didn't understand. It took me a week of begging my mom to let me play with my tea set before she allowed me to take it down. She helped me set it up in the living room, this time where she could keep an eye on me while I played. About 10 minutes after I had started, I needed to use the bathroom, so I got up and left the table. After washing my hands, I went back into my room to grab another one of my stuffed animals to be a guest at my tea party, not wanting them to be jealous of being left out. I walked up to my closet to get my stuffed tiger, and when I pulled the doors open, the same girl stood there. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. She put her finger up to her mouth and gave me a motion with her finger to not speak. Even if I could have at the time, I was so afraid, I'm not sure I could have. "Don't drink from that cup," she told me. It came out almost like a whisper. "It hurts here." She reached out to my stomach, but instead of touching me, her hand passed through me. I felt my stomach clench, and a wave of pain and nausea flooded through me. I thought I was going to throw up. The girl disappeared right before me. My legs gave out, and I crumpled to the floor, holding my stomach. My mom came into my room and found me on the ground, moaning in pain. She lifted my head and kissed my forehead, her way of checking for a fever. "You don't feel warm," she told me. "Are you feeling okay, Hope?" I told her what had happened in my room, from her appearing in my closet, her speaking, and then when she had touched my stomach. By the time I had told her everything, a look of panic was firmly on my mom's face. She told me we were going to put the tea set away. I tried to protest, but she refused to budge. That same day, my mom and dad put the tea set up in the attic for storage. I cried, begged and pleaded with both of them to not take my tea set away. "Why are you doing this?" I bawled. "Why?" but no matter what I said, they refused to give it back to me. The tea set stayed there for many years. It wasn't until I was a teenager that my parents agreed to give it back to me. I had a better understanding of the paranormal and what had happened with the tea set. My mom had told me that she had seen the same girl the night after my birthday, and she had explained to her that she wasn't trying to scare anyone. We decided that the girl must have been poisoned by drinking something that killed her, and she was trying to warn me. Regardless, I never used the tea set again. I placed it in my room as a decoration. When we moved a few years later, the box was dropped and the tea set was destroyed. I believe that the ghost of the little girl was attached to the set. When the set was broken, she was no longer stuck. I guess the moral learned from this experience is that you have to be careful about what you buy. A seemingly innocent object such as a tea set can invite things into your home. This time, I got lucky with a spirit that wanted to do me no harm. That isn't always the case, I know now. That year, I definitely got more for my birthday than I'd bargained for. Most of us have heard the warnings out there about buying things from people online. You don't know who they are, and so you might be walking into a situation that could potentially be dangerous, just for a deal that seems way too good to be true. That isn't what happened to me, though. The danger wasn't from the person, but what came with the item itself. My roommate and I had been talking about getting a pool table for the house for quite a while. The problem was that neither of us had the money to be able to afford a new one, and most of the used ones we had seen were in pretty bad shape. That didn't deter us from looking, though. Finally, after a few months of searching, we came across an ad for a table that was being sold by someone in the area. I emailed the seller, and after receiving some pictures of the item, we decided it was worth going to look at. The price was much less than the table was worth, and if it was even remotely close to what the pictures looked like, we would definitely be getting the better end of the deal. When we arrived at the seller's home, we noticed that it was a pretty nice place. The fact that we weren't in some seedy part of town put my mind at ease that this wasn't some sort of setup and gave me hope that the table was in as good of shape as the pictures showed. When we were let in, the owner walked up to his garage and showed us the table. It was taken apart, but by the looks of it, there wasn't any damage to it whatsoever. We asked why it was being sold, but he seemed to dodge the question altogether. We were too excited about getting it, though, and the asking price that we didn't really care why, just how quickly we could finish the transaction. We gave him the money and loaded the pool table into the truck. We set it up almost immediately after we got home. After waiting so long to get one, we were both pretty eager to try it out. We played long into the night that first evening. We even ordered takeout so we didn't have to cook. It wasn't until after 2 a.m. in the morning when we finally called it quits. The next morning, I was awakened by the sound of the billiard balls rolling around out in the living room. I knew my roommate loved to play, but after both of us being up so late the night before, and the fact that he isn't exactly what you would call a morning person, the noise was a little odd. I went and turned on a fan to drown out the noise and went back to sleep. When I was finally ready to get out of bed, I walked into the kitchen and found my roommate eating a bowl of cereal. I made a joke about him needing to get up early so he could get some practice in so I didn't beat him as badly as I had the night before. He must have thought I was joking, because he told me he had woken up by the same noise and thought I was the one playing. I went into the living room and looked at the table. All of the balls were in the triangle where I had left them the night before. I know I had heard the noises, and my roommate wouldn't lie about playing, so I figured I must have been hearing things from being woke up so early in the morning. Both of us hearing the same thing didn't seem likely, but we dismissed the strangeness of the subject pretty quickly. We both had to go to work the next day, but made plans to play a few games later on. When I got home, I was surprised, to say the least, that I found all of the balls scattered throughout the living room. I figured my roommate was messing with me after accusing him of playing pool in the morning, but I didn't think it was likely that he had come home from work just to mess with me. That wasn't his style, and he didn't get enough time to get to the house and back. When he got home, I asked him about it, and once again, he denied having anything to do with it. I was starting to get a little upset that he wouldn't just come clean. Besides, who else could have done it? We weren't two people to stay mad at each other long, so in a couple of hours, I went back and apologized for losing my temper, but he still insisted that he didn't touch it. That night, I went to sleep early after being exhausted the entire day from staying up too late playing pool. Sometime around 1 a.m., I was woken up by the sounds of someone playing pool in the living room. I stormed out there, ready to confront him for being rude, but the balls were in the triangle, and all the cues were put up in their hangers on the wall. There was no way someone could have put everything away that quickly and quietly before I got in there. My roommate walked into the room, sleep evident in his eyes, and he asked me what I was doing playing pool so late when he was trying to sleep. I denied playing, but now it was him that seemed unwilling to accept what I was telling him since he had caught me there first. This went on for a couple of weeks, every few nights or so, where we would be woken up by the sound of someone playing pool, but no matter what we did, we couldn't ever find a reason for it. Some of the worst frights I got was when the cue ball sounded like it had hit the ground hard and would roll around the floor. We finally had to admit neither one of us was doing it when both of us heard it happen when the other one was out of the house. Other than the time, though, when the balls had been scattered all around the room, nothing seems to have been moved when we hear the sound. I even tried to use sage to cleanse it, but that same night, I heard the sounds again. A little over a month went by, and we decided we would get rid of the table. We both think that it was so cheap because whatever is attached to it was also acting up in the last house it was in. I really learned a valuable lesson, though. Sometimes, when a deal seems too good to be true, sometimes that is exactly what it is. When I was 14, one of my school friends asked a few of us to come over to his house so that we could try out a Ouija board. We all gathered around a chessboard in his garage where he had arranged Scrabble letters in a circle on it. For the spirit to communicate with us, we used a whiskey tumbler with a silver dollar on it. The idea of the coin was to keep people honest. We figured if someone was pushing the indicator around themselves, the coin would fall off while the glass would stay in place. So obviously, real scientific stuff. We started with the typical, "Is anyone there?" questions a few times, but the glass didn't move. He picked up the glass to look at it, and I saw him narrow his eyes a bit. "Look at this," he told us. When I looked at the glass, I noticed that the glass had acquired a crack in it that hadn't been there when we started. Although the glass hadn't moved, I got a bit of a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. He replaced the glass on the chessboard with a coin on top and asked again if anyone was present. The glass began to move and spelled out the word yes. We continued to ask questions, and slowly the board began to answer our questions. I remember asking if God was real, and it spelled out bull. None were especially religious at the table, but there was a definite impact on that statement. As we continued to ask questions, we were told that it was an uncle of one of the boys in the garage that had died in a car crash a few years ago that was speaking to us. As we continued asking questions, the tumbler started moving quicker around the board, at times knocking the letters to the floor, seemingly gaining energy. We asked him if he was okay, and he told us that he was. One thing that you need to know about what was going on at this point is that different points of time when we were asking questions, one of us would at times look like they would suddenly close their eyes, almost like they were asleep, and then suddenly come to. He also told us he would like us to visit his grave. He said he would like that. We asked him what type of flowers he would like us to bring him. I suddenly got very sleepy, and my eyes closed. I got a distinct picture of a yellow daffodil in my head. Right after I came to, the indicator spelled out just that. This was the point when I began to suspect that the spirit that was speaking to us wasn't actually our friend's uncle. The image in my head and the message that mirrored it gave me a really bad feeling. It could have been my rising fear, but this is where I believe that things started getting bad. In the dark, we heard a couple of bangs on the boxes the board was sitting on, then on the side of the garage. The boxes could have been one of us shifting, but the loud noise in the quiet space made all of us jump. We decided that we had seen enough and asked if we could say goodbye to the spirit. But the spirit spelled out, "No." That was all it took to convince me I should get out of there. I took my hands off the glass and walked out of the garage. My friend, Marshall, must have had the same idea because he followed me out. We were standing out there for a few minutes when another of my friends came out and told us the uncle had gotten angry after we had left. He asked us to come back to it. Reluctantly, we both agreed, but refused to participate any longer. The spirit shortly thereafter agreed to leave with the promise that we would have another session soon. After we had released the spirit, all of us took the chessboard, the scramble tiles, the cup and coin, and threw them into a canal that was behind my friend's house. Then, without saying anything, every one of us ran back home. We didn't even take the time to tell one another good night. That night, I was plagued by horrible nightmares. I could see a figure in the shadows around me in a dark room, but I couldn't quite make it out. It would circle around me like it was stalking me. I kept waking up in a cold sweat to the feeling that someone was in my room watching me, even though I couldn't see anyone there. A few days later, the same guy asked us to come by his garage to try again with the Ouija board. I said I would come, but ended up canceling at the last minute, too afraid of a repeat performance. It also seemed that my friend Marshall had seen enough himself to be wary and decided to cancel as well. Later the next day, he said that the uncle was angry with us for not showing up and threatened to hurt our face and hands. But I figured maybe they were just making this up as a way to scare us, but I wasn't completely sure. I wouldn't have taken this seriously just a few days ago, but now I didn't know what to think. What happened soon after, though, dispelled all doubts of the seriousness of the statement. I was walking home with a friend of mine from the store, eating a bag of chips, when I felt what I could only describe as an electric jolt go through my hand and settle into my jaw. My mouth completely dried up, and I nearly choked on the food that was in my mouth. I immediately reacted and started yelling at my friend, thinking he was trying to pull some sort of practical joke. However, he was genuinely surprised and a little afraid of the reaction that I had made. The same thing happened later on in the day when I touched a metal fence. I know that what we came into contact with that night in the garage wasn't my friend's uncle. I also know that it had the ability to affect me in ways that still give me the chills today when I think about it. One thing I'm sure of, though, is I will never use a Ouija board again.